You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Wait, am I the host? Wait, is it me? Is it me today? Oh my gosh. Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. The Chris Voss Show. I've got a memo here that says that I'm supposed to be the host of the show. So what do I do now? No, I'm just kidding. Jesus, I've been doing it for almost 14 years. Welcome to the show, my family and friends. We certainly appreciate you. The Chris Voss Show, the family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law. Anyway, guys, welcome to the show. We're going to be talking about some different strategic ways, I suppose strategic. We'll find out from the brilliant author we have on the show, but some ways to survive divorce and co-parenting and all those things that are happening in today's world, and give you some tools to improve that quality of that experience so that your kids can be happy and everybody can hopefully be a little happier. It's not the most funnest thing to do in the world, but I think most everyone's done through it. I mean, judging by everyone I meet and everybody I know in my age group, they've already got 2 or 3 under their belt. So I'm still working on getting my first divorce. I'm saving up for it, and then I'll get married and hit the wheel. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking to her about her book and her amazing insights. Also, as always, the plugs: go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, and all the crazy places on the internet. She is the author of the newest book to come out April 11th, 2023. Beth Behrendt is on the show with us today. Her newest book, Nesting After Divorce, Co-Parenting in the Home, is now out wherever fine books are sold. And we're going to be talking to her about her amazing book, her insights, and a lot of the research. And I believe she's done some other work on this as well. She is a freelance writer and divorced mother of 3. She's written articles about nesting for the New York Times and Psychology Today. She's a regular contributor to Divorce Magazine. Wait, there's a magazine for this? Well, it makes sense, actually. There's a magazine for everything. There should be a magazine for the Chris Voss Show. I need to get on that. She has been a guest blogger for Laura Wasser's It's Over Easy website. Is that about eggs? No, I'm just kidding. Beth has shared her family nesting story as a guest on multiple podcasts, including The Good Divorce, Divorce and Beyond, Divorcing Well, and Thank You Heartbreak. Wow, there should be a magazine for all the podcasts on divorce. Beth and her ex-husband Bill are available for interviews, and you can see them in action on Good Morning America's segment that they were on as well. Welcome to the show, Beth. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you today?
I am good, as always. And thank you for coming on the show. Congratulations on the launch of your book. Those are always fun. Give us a .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
The best place to start is familynesting.org. That has all the nesting related content. But you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook if you just look for Beth Behrendt.
There you go. I guess I need to start a side a divorce podcast or something. This looks a pretty popular sort of topic going on these days.
Well, as you said, it's a pretty popular, for lack of a better word, event in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, definitely. Now, is this your first book you've written on the topic?
Yeah. It is my first book on anything. So
there you go. Congratulations. This is always a fun crossover. You spend all that hellish time in editing, and they tear apart your heart and your work and everything you do, and just take a giant crap on it. And then, you go rewrite everything. And, the editing process, I'll never forget of writing a book. So congratulations on getting through that. Most people don't. So it's really hard. Give us a 30,000-foot overview of the book and what it entails.
Okay, well, first of all, nesting, for those who don't know, nesting, co-parenting, means that after divorce, the kids stay in the family home, and it's the parents who take turns moving in and out to parent them, rather than kids going between 2 houses. And so this book tells the story of my family. My ex and I and our 3 children have been nesting for 9 years. believe it or not. Um, but I also tell the story of 5 other families from places like Brooklyn, the DC suburbs, Toronto, just to give an overview of how people do it differently in different parts of the country. I obviously live in Indiana, in the heart of the heartland. But I also talk to some attorneys and financial advisors, realtors, and of course, therapists to get their take on how to make a nesting arrangement work for your own family, because each family is unique. So there's some common lessons, but there's a lot of different ways to do it.
And did I describe it well in the intro that I was throwing out there? It's kind of maybe a blueprint of a type where people can try and find a positive way to grow together it will not grow together, but basically help their kids in a positive manner instead of some of the ugliness and fighting that we see in.
Right. I think what attracts most people to the idea of nesting is that it's a way to get out of an unhappy marriage, but not blow up your children's lives at the same
Mm,
times. Their lives stay really pretty consistent, except it's, a different parent at a different time. Not that there aren't, challenges to it, but that is
mhm.
kind of the driving force, is to try and keep the kids' lives as consistent as possible. Whether it's just something you do temporarily as you figure out the next stage of, if you want a 2 household divorce, or some people like myself have been doing it for years and years. And in our case, we planned to just do it for a year, but we liked it so much that we have kept with it. And
Mhm.
now our youngest still is going to be home for a few more years before college. So
Hmm.
we'll get him off to college and then wrap it up.
There you go. So, not screwing up the kids by, putting them through ugly divorces. I mean, where's the fun in that? I mean, I thought that was the whole point of parenting, was to
Oh,
scar your
really?
kids so they had something to spend the rest of their lives in psychology
Yeah,
units
to
for.
scar your children. Well,
Yeah.
if that's your goal, then you probably don't want to read my book.
I don't know, man. That's
Or do exactly the opposite of what I suggest you do.
there you go. So, what is the term nesting? What is that?
Well, it used to be more often called bird nesting. So it really is,
Mhm.
referencing the idea of the baby birds staying in the nest and how the mom and dad bird fly in and out to take care of them and bring them tasty worms and stuff. But it obviously applies to grown-ups and children, and keeping the kids in the home while the parents take turns coming back and forth.
And feed them worms? No, I'm just kidding. We just do
No,
comedy on the
maybe
show.
McDonald's if they're being good.
Worms might be more healthier. So there you go. I've seen that food. I'm wearing some of that food. Um, so now you wrote an article for the New York Times back in 2017. After
Mhm.
divorce, giving our kids custody of the home. Give us a breakdown on what that means, because my dad gave me custody of his home. He went out for milk when I was 10 and never came back, and I had to fend for myself. So there's that. No, that's a gaming joke,
I
people.
know that's not true. You're just
He
saying
did it when I was 13.
that.
It wasn't true, but
Well, I mean, it's not like we didn't legally give them custody of the
yeah,
home. It
like
was
that sounds
more
like a bad thing.
I think that would be a
I've
bad
seen what
idea.
kids do in the home.
It just meant that they got to stay in the home, and so there was no custody battle about who got which kids for how long. It was just something we worked out between the 2 of us. In our case, when we first divorced, and as I said, since we weren't sure we were going to stick with nesting, for us, the cheapest option seemed to be that we rented a small 1-bedroom apartment near the house. And so, I mean, I use the word we shared the apartment. We were never there at the same time, and we were never in the family home at the same time. We would, pass each other like ships in the night down the driveway,
Mm.
heading to the apartment or the house. So we did that because it was a pretty cheap way, and it was certainly cheaper than setting up 2 full-size households to support 3 kids right from the get-go. So that gave us a chance, to sort of get our feet under us financially, and also really just see how the kids were doing and how each of us was doing moving into this next stage of life. And
Huh.
obviously we liked it because here we still are.
So I'm trying to understand the model here. Is Are the 2 parents still living in the same family home, but there's an apartment somewhere, or are the 2 in two different homes they're living in, but somehow they raise the kids in the nest of the apartment?
Well, everybody seems to do it differently. In
Mm.
our case, in our home, we have a guest bedroom and in the basement, and so I moved into that. My ex kept the master bedroom, so we moved our stuff into those separate places. Um, but as I said, we were never in the house at the same time, so he would go to the apartment and I would go, into the house and stay in the basement
Hmm.
suite. I mean, some people do continue to share the master bedroom and just like have the rules that you have to wash the sheets before the other person comes in. They have separate closets and just keep it separate that way. Some people do both, go to different apartments, or perhaps one of them goes to live with a new significant other or lives with family or friends. And so there's all sorts of different ways that people make it work.
Hmm.
But the main point is that the kids stay in the same home that they're used to.
And they're not being shuttled between two different
Right.
homes and that
Yeah.
whole handoff. I
Right.
mentioned before the show, I've been single all my life, and I've had to deal with the fallouts of divorce. I've had to sit down with birth fathers. I don't know what you call them, but basically the
The
birth
dads.
fathers.
Yeah.
The dads who they're not the stepdads or anything. They're that is their child.
Yeah.
And I've dealt with all of it. I've had to go into relationships sometimes where I've been like, realizing that I'm buying into their failed marriage, and I have to deal with them, which is very hard to do. Actually, most people don't realize how hard it is to come in that situation. But sometimes I had to sit down with both of them and say, look, I don't have a vested interest in these children other than starting to enter a relationship, but you two need to get the fuck along, because these kids are the ones that are going to get harmed the most. I've had to sit down with
Totally right.
dads and go, hey, I'm not here to replace you. My job is not to compete with you or make you look bad in front of the eyes of your
Mhm.
children. So it would really help if you wouldn't do things that make you look bad in the eyes of your children. And I understand what you're going through, dude, but we all gotta move along here on the societal whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So and so I've dealt with that situation of like, Bob didn't send the coat back, and Bob's holding on to all the clothes of the kids, and mom's doing the same shit. And
It's crazy.
it's like a war going on of
Yeah.
attrition of some type. And you're just like, look, you know what? It's funny that you guys wanted to get away from each other so much, and you really spend 100% of your time actively hating each other and trying to screw each other over. And like,
Yeah.
you both need to move the hell on.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's interesting because my ex, who I obviously we're divorced, so we had our issues, but we get along very well now. And I remember there was a point, kind of after first couple of years of a fair amount of contention after the divorce, and we just sort of moved into this new stage. So this time had passed, and we've been working really hard to have a better relationship for our kids. And he was like, "Oh, it is a lot easier to not hate someone than it is to hate them. Like that
yeah.
takes so much more energy." And so, yes, it's unbelievable the amount of energy that people put into hating each other instead of that could be energy going to better parent their children. And it's a shame.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen love withdrawal games, or pawn games where people play games with the children and use them as pawns in some sort of, and I can get why people are upset. They
Oh,
put
yeah.
their life into marriage. They believe that, maybe it's going to last forever. They think that they're building something, and to see it all come tumbling down, and all the hopes and dreams and everything they put into it comes to an end. It's not fun.
Right.
But I think the important thing about books like yours and knowledge on this subject is sadly something we don't teach, and they really should teach in college. I'm a big believer, and of course, I've never been married and have kids, so what do I know? But I'm a big believer that people really need to be trained better to have better relationships, to go see psychiatrists and work out their issues before they get into relationships that
Mhm.
bring children into the factor. They should go through at least 2 years of college before they're allowed to have kids. But what do I know? No one ever agrees with me on that. It's just like, hey, let's go have some kids and see what kind of wreckage we
Yeah.
can drag from our past in our lives, and ruin the next generation. Let's do that. That sounds like
Yeah.
fun.
Well,
Anyway.
sadly, I think a lot of people think, oh, having kids will fix the problems in our
Yeah,
marriage.
that's true.
This will make him want
Yeah.
to stick around.
I've heard that
And,
before too. Yeah, I had the third
and
kid because I thought it would help our
I thought,
failing
yeah,
marriage.
that's
You're
crazy.
just like, no, that's just like throwing more. That's like throwing gasoline onto an
Yeah,
already out of control
yeah,
fire.
yeah.
So, what's the best way to approach this? Let's say there's someone in the audience and they're thinking about divorce, or they're maybe
Mhm.
going through divorce. What's the best way to sit down and try and get a reset or an agreement to say, hey, let's do something for the kids and not about us, and let's try and refocus on this.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody can take their own creative approach, but I do have a section in the book where I talk about the first conversations, what you need to discuss if you're either proposing nesting to your soon-to-be ex, or maybe you both have the idea of doing it. And of course, first is really just some really basic stuff like, are both of us willing to give this a try? Like
Mhm.
genuinely willing to try. It needs to be clear that you're not doing it to try and save the marriage. At this point, you're doing it because you are moving on and you want to do this for the kids. I mean, of course, if you both are trying to save the marriage, but if there's just one of you thinking that nesting is going to save the marriage, that's not a good situation to get into. And then, of course, to talk about like where else could we live, or one of us live, or can we set up the house so that we have private space? And it's interesting the creative ways that people come up with doing this. I have a Facebook group for people who nest, and one woman recently was posting that she, on her days when she's off duty out of the nest, she gets in her Airstream camper and goes out to the campsite and spends
Mm.
a few days out there. And I was like, wow, that sounds really nice. That's a great idea if you live in a nice enough environment to do that. So people do all sorts of creative stuff. So those are the big things to figure out. Are we willing to do it? How else could we live to make this work? And, what can we afford to do
Mhm.
in terms of this other non-nest space?
You bring up a good point. One of the biggest problems, and especially a lot of men have, is they usually the home is turned over to the mother in divorce courts, so they're required to go, live somewhere. They've got to set up a whole separate unit, and then they've got usually child support and alimony that they're dealing with, or most likely child support, and it becomes very costly for them.
Mhm.
And sometimes they have a hard time maintaining the child support and the alimony or whatever they need to do. There's lots of quote unquote deadbeat dads, and sometimes they just can't, whether it's working or whatever the case is, they have trouble paying those bills. So maybe this was a better way to, I mean, like I talked to you before the show. I've had friends that I believe have done the nesting thing, and I don't know if they did it for finances or out of just trying to do what you were doing. Um, but I know some people, they can't afford to get divorced.
Mhm.
So maybe that can help that sort of situation where you can kind of ensure that there's resources that the father and mother can still bring to the kid without breaking the bank.
Right, exactly. I think I mean, I knew that was part of our reason for doing it, but it really drove that home the more nesters I spoke to and the people I interviewed in the book, that finances really were, yes, helping the kids is great, but finances were really a big part of the equation for them as they looked at what their options are. And some people even, don't pursue the divorce process officially right away because
Mhm.
of the cost, but they, both agree that the marriage is over. And so this is obviously some very evolved people who are willing to just, say the marriage is done and we're each moving on. And when we have to officially get divorced, we'll do it. But for now, we're separating our lives, but keeping the kids' lives consistent.
Now, how do people, because you interviewed a few different people with the two different models, how do people deal with dating though? Because that kind of, I mean, you can't like bring your dates home, or can you? Or have people figured out
Well,
a way to
yeah,
make that
right.
thing work?
It's one of the probably hottest topics that kind of in the second conversation, a lot of people have, once they've agreed to nest, that's the next thing is, what are the rules about dates or other adults in the nest? Which really, I think every divorced parent should be having discussions about how
Mhm.
are we going to introduce future people to our children. You just don't want every person that you happen to be dating to meet your kids. You want to make sure it's serious. And so a lot of nesters do kind of write up a nesting agreement where, for the first year or something like that, first year, nobody else in the nest, nobody else meets the kids.
Mm.
In our case, Bill and I had agreed that we wouldn't introduce the kids to a significant other until he and I had spoken with each other and let each other know that we were thinking of doing that.
Mhm.
And I also talked it through with my own therapist about how to do that appropriately. And my children were seeing a therapist after the divorce, so I was able to get her help on how to do that. And so I outlined some of those guidelines from therapists about how to introduce your kids, which I think applies to anybody, whether they're nesting or not. But
Mhm.
you're right, the nest creates a space that's, I think in a way it was actually good for dating because the nest was kind of this like sacred
Protected zone.
family space, that neither of us wanted to bring the wrong person into. So we both felt pretty strongly about the people we were seeing by the time we thought it was okay to have them visit the nest.
And really, I mean, you could use if you had an apartment on the side, like you
Well,
mentioned, you
that's when
could
I did,
use
yeah. I
yeah,
dated all the time then, but yeah,
that's
but
the shack
not
shack.
when I was
Um,
in the home.
and honestly, as a guy who's dated all of his life, and I mean, in the triple digits, I've dated, there's a point where I dated women who hadn't been married. And then, once I hit like 28, something 30, then it just became divorced women. And now it's like multiple divorced women. And, I don't date guys, so I don't know what's going on over there. But I imagine it's the same considering all my 50-year-old
Yeah.
buds are they've all been divorced multiple times. I'm really behind. I'm still waiting to catch up. I'm gonna do like 3 or 4 divorces like within a week of each other, and then
Mhm.
marriage and divorces, so I can try and catch up. I'm gonna do it somewhere near the end of the game when I can't
You
feel
think
my
you get
legs.
some you think you get some kind of prize at the end, the number of divorces
I
you
don't
can.
know. Evidently there is because
Well,
everyone's doing it, right?
I don't know that I
Is
would
there like an old
recommend it.
gamification thing that I get? Because I feel left out at this point. Anyway, no, I don't.
Well,
But my point that I was rolling to was the one thing you learn in the dating game, and I learned this from other people when I was coming up in the dating game. Coming up, what is it like what is it, a pro series? I think it is at my level. Um, is you do not date someone who's been divorced unless they've been divorced 2 years from the signing of the end of the divorce by the judge. And if it's been a long time, like 10, 15, 20 years, give it 3 to 4. 20 years, I give it 5. And and the reason I bring this up is I tell people this all the time that get newly dated, don't date. Don't go looking for somebody. You have a whole identity process. You're having a loss of identity process of
mhm,
being married
right,
and then going through you have to reestablish who you are. You have to become a new
right,
person because you
yeah,
are not married Joe to Jane
yeah,
anymore, and you have to become just Joe or Jane. And then you got to figure out who that person is. You've got to
mm,
go through a grieving process because this is a death. It's a death of a
yeah,
dream. It's a death of your ideals,
mhm,
all the hopes and whatever, blah, 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 you put into it and retirement
mhm,
and all that fantasy thing that you put in your head about what it might be. It's the death of all that. And so you have to grieve it. You got to go through the stages and all that stuff.
yeah.
Then you got to become a new person. And so I tell people, I'm like, don't be going out trying to get your freak on. Don't be trying to go get weird with all the thing. Go to a psychiatrist, man.
Mhm,
Shut down, do the work through your process. Please see a psychiatrist because I'm sick of
mm,
seeing on first dates, please, people.
yeah,
Um, and work through it. But you need to go through that 2 to 3 years of healing. And people that go out and start dating right away, you're just like taking this mentally broken down jalopy into just into a mess. And so that's my PSA for people.
yeah, well, especially looking to date seriously, if you're just
Exactly.
dating around, whatever, but if you're looking, trying to get into a serious relationship right away, it's way too soon. I
Yeah.
will say what I really liked about nesting was that because I had this apartment space that I went to, outside of the home,
Mhm.
I really felt like I could pursue that new version of myself that I was becoming without the distractions of kid stuff. Like if I'm in the house, I can't help but do laundry, grocery shop, whether the kids are there or not. There's just always kid stuff to do. And I loved that I could just leave the house and be in this completely kid-free space, and I could write, I could watch whatever I wanted to watch, I could go out with friends, and I loved having that separation as I was figuring out the next stage of my life.
And that was you processing, the grief and the whole thing, and who am I
Who
now,
am I
and
now? Yeah.
what am
Yeah.
I about? And people, and then there's a little bit of experimentation where they go like, do I like woodworking, or what sort of new hobbies do I need to have?
Right.
Because being married takes up a lot of your space, and you're dealing with another person, and
Yeah.
you kind of have to become somebody, and you have to cleanse yourself. If you
Mhm.
don't, you're just going to take that baggage into the next relationship. Seen that movie?
Yeah.
And so you gotta clean your house, and
Mhm.
it's so important for the kids as well. Divorce is so hard on the children, and they have the hardest time doing it. And
Mhm.
being a guy who comes in, is dating the mother, I've had to have so many conversations with the kids and go, hey, and they're looking at me as the voice of reason sometimes. I've gone into relationships where both the both of them are alcoholics, the parents are alcoholics, they're calling each
Mhm.
other constantly, and I have to be the voice of reason and tell the kids, hey, listen, okay, this is what's happening. It's not a fun process, but
Mhm.
understand your parents love you, or at least I think they do, and they're just behaving really badly right now.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah,
That people can't put their kids, can't get
first.
over
Yeah.
their own stuff before they subject their kids to all that.
Yeah. People just need to put their thing aside and just focus on the kids. But I like the idea of the nest, because I've seen what that looks like when the kids just feel like they're shuttled back and forth.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
like, did Bob send the coat back? Oh God, Bob
yeah.
kept the coat.
Well, that's the thing. Not only is it stressful for the kids,
Yeah.
like where's my favorite toy or where's the
Hmm.
skirt I wanted to wear today, but it also is stressful for each of the other parents because they're like, why didn't you send that? You know, he had basketball today, or
Yeah.
or I've got to drive to school and drop this off because you didn't know. I mean, the people I know who deal with that, like traditional contentious shuttling stuff back and forth, the amount of energy they spend
Oh,
just with stuff
I'm
is
first. I'm a first witness of that.
I've never had to do that except my own stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm a grown up and I don't have that much stuff. So
Yeah,
it's
it is
difficult.
hard, and I can imagine if you're nesting in the same place, and you can get along, it can be so much better. The other big failure I've seen is people that go into divorce court, and I've had to go testify in family court, for some friends, and I've seen people blow through $50,000, $100,000 each that could have been put in a college fund for kids, just to
Yeah.
argue in divorce court and end up with a resolution that was the same they originally offered.
Right. Right.
And you're just like, you do you understand you're really screwing over your children?
Yeah.
Like, when
And
you
it's
have
just for their ego. It's just about
yeah, it's
ego.
just an
It's
ego
not,
thing.
it's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
But we were fortunate that, I mean, and this is credit to Bill as well. But by the time we filed for divorce, and it was done 3 months later. Like
Mm,
we knew we wanted to do this nesting. We knew we wanted to get the divorce done as quickly as possible. And so, yeah, we were really happy not to drag that on and
yeah.
add to the expense.
And the other thing is people play a lot of parent alienation games, so the children become pawns.
Mhm.
So we're not fulfilling the agreement of the visitation rights. And what the funny thing about it's not really funny, but the funny thing about divorce courts and divorce law is there's no enforcement if a parent who has guardianship won't share the children. There's enforcement of child support and alimony, because that
Mhm.
the state gets a gig on that. They get a cut of the action, which is the reason they're financially invested. It's become like an institution.
Yeah.
But the whole sharing the parent thing, all that you can do is just go get the judge to yell at the wife or husband, whoever's the thing, and there really
Mhm.
is no legal enforcement of it, which is very sad. And the most important thing that parents need to realize is this is damage to the children.
Right.
And I talk a lot about the importance of parents being in a child's life.
Mhm.
Men and women are compatible, or what is it?
Mhm.
They are different, but they complement each other.
Yeah.
And if you don't have one, you will cripple the child. And I was lucky that, we were joking earlier in the green room about how my parents probably should have never got married.
Mhm.
But they tried, and they did their best. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's just good enough in life. I've
Yeah.
learned,
Yeah.
because that's all I do is my best, and it's never good enough. So um
Oh,
that's probably why I've never been married, don't have kids. I mean, that's what we do. We stumble through life, all of us, and
right.
I didn't get a manual. Maybe you did, but mine didn't come in the mail.
Not yet.
Yeah. That's because the post office is doing it. I'm just kidding. It's a post office joke.
Well, going back to your point about the parents' involvement, my ex, Bill, has said, a number of times that what he liked about nesting, that was challenging when it first started, was that it forced him to become more engaged with the kids, because
Mhm.
we'd had a kind of traditional breakdown of roles in the family. He was the primary breadwinner. I did all the house and kids stuff. But when we began nesting and I wasn't in the house, he had to make sure their laundry was done, had to see what homework had to be done the next day, had to make sure that, they ate breakfast before they went to school. And it was challenging, but he became such a better dad because of that just
Mm.
involvement in the day-to-day life that a lot of dads, I shouldn't generalize by sex, but that in many marriages that doesn't always happen. And so he's always said that he was grateful for the divorce and the nesting, that it made him a more engaged dad.
There you go. And having parents, having a father does things in a relationship with his children that mothers don't do, and mothers bring
Mhm.
something that's a compliment to the table that fathers can't do,
Yeah.
and they need that role. I remember I had a friend call me one time, and she was newly divorced in a bitter divorce with her ex, and she was playing the pawn game with the kids and demonizing the father
Mm-hmm.
and alienating the father, not letting the father have access to the kids. And her daughter was like starting to want to go into modeling and maybe some other things that goes when you're trying to seek the attention of men. And I'm like, you're y- she's starting to go down a pathway of destruction that she's
Mm-hmm.
seeking the approval of men, and she's seeking men because she can't get access to her father. You
Mm-hmm.
need to understand what this is about. And I've seen the fallout of this through all of my history of, when I go into a relationship or when I date someone who's divorced, I see the kids messed up sometimes. I see all the fallout, and you just sit
Mm-hmm.
and put it together, and you're like, okay, these kids are fucked up because you guys didn't handle this divorce right. And you guys are playing this game, and every day you're
No,
just
I'm
like,
not laughing because it's funny. It's
yeah.
terrible, and it's a real shame. And I thought it was interesting when I was dating. I could immediately tell sort of the tone of the divorce if the man I was speaking to would not say his ex-wife's name. He would just say her, she's got the kids, like could not even speak her name. And that was always the clue to me, like, this seems like a bit more
Wow,
drama that I want to
that's
get
some real
into.
scars right there. You
Yeah,
know,
so keep an eye out for that when you're when
yeah.
you're dating women. See if that's also
I'm so
that's my
well,
little
I mean,
tip.
usually I get the thing that the past 3 marriages, everyone was a narcissist and all the 10 boyfriends were
Everybody
narcissists,
else's
and
problem. Yeah.
that's the popular thing now. Everyone's using narcissist default. And I'm
I
like,
know.
there's only 5% of the
Who's really
population
a
that are
narcissist?
narcissists,
Yeah,
but
right.
somehow you found all of them to date, which is
All of
really
them
weird.
fate.
Like, I don't know if do you have that in your Tinder profile or your search
Well, like
thing?
you said, that's kind of, one of the main things after divorce is you're figuring out your new self, is you really do
Yeah,
have to face what you did wrong in the
yeah,
marriage.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're never gonna move past it. If maybe in some cases it's totally the other person's fault, but in most cases, it's both people.
Yeah, it takes I somehow I was lucky enough 2 or 3 generations of Gen X to be born into the thing where when people got divorced, they would just say, "It takes 2 to tango."
Yeah,
And we just go, "Okay, well,
yeah,
you're getting divorced. Okay. Well, 50-50.
yeah, yeah.
You just didn't mix well. It's kind of like vodka and Mountain Dew. It doesn't mix well.
Mm-mm.
Um and that's just what happens. I mean, I've had a million wonderful women in my life, not a million, but I'm working on it at
Close.
this pace since I can't afford divorce, and so I never get married. But and I love them all. I don't have any hatred or anger towards them because I feel that's healthy, and I recognize that I tried the best that I could with whatever I had at the time, and I wasn't
Yeah,
always perfect, and so did they. And that's
right,
what
right.
people do in life and dating. They try each other on. You see if you
Mhm,
gel.
mhm.
Maybe you gel for a while. Maybe you grow apart. It's just the way it works. Because you
Yeah,
can't. I own companies. That's what I'm married to. And the one thing I learned that I love about companies is I can if things aren't working, I can try and fix them, and they're very fixable because they're just one dimensional basically. But
Mhm.
with another human being, they've got their glide path of life and you have yours and stuff.
Yeah.
And so you just gotta go, hey man, things didn't work out. I probably did some stuff and I'm gonna own up to it. And let's try not to drag that into my next relationship.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of
Well,
people are like, hey, let's take the fun of the last one into the next one, see how this works.
right, right. And you
What's
know
that?
what? I think actually a lot of people who are drawn to nesting kind of is the same thing that they experienced really
Hmm.
bad divorces in their childhood. Several of the people I interviewed were like, my parents had a terrible divorce, and I was not going to do that to my kids. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, with any relationship, you have to look at was what happened before good or bad, and what made it that way, and can you
Yeah.
change it?
And you just own up to your end of it. And I
Mhm.
mean, if I ever saw any of my girlfriends, I don't usually, what's behind me is behind me. But it's always been my attitude has always been like, hey, I hope you found what you're looking for in life, and
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
for what I learned off of our lessons. You being crazy? No, I'm just kidding. And
And me
and
being perfect.
yeah, that time you tried to stab me in the kitchen because I left my socks on the floor. Yeah, I get it. I shouldn't have done that, but seriously, a knife? No, I'm just kidding. These are jokes, people. Some of them. That'll be my forthcoming book. Uh, but no, that maybe I should do a book on my life as a single guy and my experience with divorces and how to be better divorces. But no, I believe I
That's an interesting perspective. I think that's a good idea.
would, and there's very few people that have it, so I'm kind of a unicorn in that. Like we
Mhm.
joked about in the show, like, I'll have people that'll say to me on second or third date, they'll be like, "Chris, you don't have to hide your divorces and all
Yeah,
your kids," and I'm like,
yeah,
"No, seriously, I don't.
I'm
Like,
telling the truth.
I don't, and I'm sorry, I don't
Mhm,
have a lot of baggage. I don't and what's funny is I have all my money and both sides of 50% of all my shit, so I like that too. But no, I like this
mhm.
concept of what you're talking about because
Thanks.
I'm a big believer from what I've seen, and I think that's what I'm trying to communicate through the show, is is children need both parents. And if you're a parent who thinks that they only need one of you and whatever societal bullshit or some movement tells you, it's bullshit. They need the father and the mother in the relationship.
Mhm.
And I'm not talking if you're an LGBTQ parent, there's usually a masculine and a feminine.
Oh, I don't
And that's
know.
what they need. They need the
They need both
masculine
parents, yes,
and the
both
feminine
parents.
in there
Yeah.
because that's what builds it. A daughter's impact that she has with a father in her life will make all the difference in her life. He's the man who sets the tone for the type of man she looks for in life. Mother, same thing. I've seen what father abandonment looks like. I've seen what mother abandonment looks like.
Yeah.
I've had friends that own strip clubs that go, if it wasn't for bad parenting, I wouldn't have anybody to work here. And
Well,
it's
I
true as
think
hell.
it comes back to kids feeling like their parents respect and value them, and whatever that
Mm,
approach takes, it doesn't have to be nesting. You can have a divorce that's, always is about respecting the kids as
mm,
individuals.
yeah.
That'll set them up for success more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen kids that go, "Hey, why can't Daddy tuck me in at night anymore? Like he
Mhm,
used to." And one of the other things we should bring up, and I don't know if you talk about this in your book, but there is a high risk to children when they don't have their father or their mother around. There's a protection element. In fact,
mhm.
the highest amount of sexual assaults happen with single parents.
Mm,
And I've seen that. The stories that I've heard from women
mhm.
I've dated that their mother was divorced and brought home a guy and
Mm,
yada yada yada. It's horrific, and this is why men get so angry about being separated from their children because they know they can't do the provider protector role because we're
mhm.
protectors, and that's usually what we're brought in to do. And
Yeah,
so
but a mom can be a protector. She should
she
be,
can be
I mean,
usually,
that's
yeah,
I'm not gonna give her, say that's okay because she's a woman.
yeah,
That is really bad parenting,
yeah.
whether it's a man or a
And so I
woman.
like what you're trying to do and create this better model. And I wish more parents would maybe be forced to go through this sort of education or courses. Maybe family courts need to say, hey, maybe you should buy your book and or maybe some other
Yeah, think
things to,
about it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's certainly worth thinking about.
yeah. Anything more you want to tease out on the book and what you have in it and advice you give to people?
Yeah, I think that it's just hopefully what would be helpful for it as well as I talk about ground rules about privacy and communication and communicating with the kids and as the situation evolves, how you handle things like new partners coming into the picture. And so hopefully the book is helpful not only with setting up a nesting arrangement, but helping you think ahead to what challenges might come your way as your kids keep getting older and you keep moving into your own life too.
Because from what all I've seen, I totally agree with you. People need to realize that being a parent is a selfless thing of giving life to another person and all your money actually too.
Mhm.
What's the old
Yep.
joke about having kids is basically you just take all your money and throw it out a window. Um, but no, it's a noble effort, and if we all wouldn't be here if parents didn't engage in having children. But there's a point that when you have children, you are giving your life to them,
Right.
over to them,
Mhm.
until they put you in a home, of course,
Yeah.
when you're 40.
Yeah.
That's the other reason I don't have kids. So but no, you're giving your life to them, and I think it's important for people to have that aspect. What's the most important? We're getting divorced. We're separating.
Yeah.
What is the number one most important thing that needs to happen here? And it needs to be selfless,
Look
just
out
as
for the kids.
you've
Yeah.
engaged in being selfless as a parent. Give everything to your child. Make your children number one. Don't
Mhm.
spend $100,000 in divorce court.
No.
Put that in a college fund for hell's sakes. Have you seen what
Yeah.
college costs nowadays?
Yeah, I have 2 in college. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
little familiar with it.
Yeah, that's a whole new divorce court
Right.
attorney fee in and of itself.
And I think, I just wanna make sure people understand too that I'm not talking about, completely coddling your children and,
Mm,
keeping them completely unexposed from the realities of life. There's gonna be plenty of crap that gets thrown at them. Life is hard, but I think if you as a parent can do something to not add more
yeah,
difficulty to their lives, that's your job.
and I can see how that would be a whole lot better. The shuttling back and forth, I almost felt sorry for kids. They're like, "Hey, we're back
Oh,
off the
yeah.
bus, and dad dropped us off," and,
Yeah.
sometimes the dad or mom drops them off, and dad's or mom's not home, and you're just like you get this
Mm.
call, and, "Hey, we're standing out front," and you're just like,
Yeah,
"Holy
gotcha.
crap," and,
Mhm.
I've seen it all, man. I've seen it all. I could write
Sounds
a
like
book
it.
about it, probably a
Honest
couple
Yeah, I
books.
think that's a good idea.
Yeah, but no, I like your concept, and
Thank you.
I can totally agree. From the
Thanks.
fallout I've seen in my life,
Yeah,
make your kids
thank
the
you.
number one thing. Heal your stuff, heal your baggage.
Right.
Don't try monkey branching into new relationships and stuff.
Not too
Go see a
soon.
psychiatrist, please.
Yeah.
I'm a big thing that everyone needs a psychiatrist nowadays, including myself.
Yeah. Well,
I've
what's that saying that everybody who goes to therapy is going because of the people in their lives who do not go to therapy. So, yes, it's helping me deal with all the people who should be in therapy.
There you go. I don't know. In my experience, people should be going to therapy to fix their own shit.
Well,
But
that was
if
I
you want to
agree.
go and complain about other people, yeah, sure. That's fine.
Well, sometimes that's helpful too.
I use Facebook to complain about the people in my lives.
Oh, that's healthy.
Usually it's either voters and political ideology. So this has been wonderful to have you on the show, Beth, and
Thank you for the opportunity.
I can't highly recommend it enough. So hopefully I've given some endorsement to that.
Thank you.
We need to build better kids in this world. We're seeing so many
Right.
fallout, so many kids with so many problems, and then they grow up and I have to date them. So let's not do that anymore because I'm tired of it.
Let's
Uh,
save Chris. Save Chris from the
save Chris, save
difficulty.
Chris. No, but seriously, save the world. The world is my children, and
There's
the
some
ideas and
yeah.
concepts of my children, and I want a better world. And the divorce rate is out of control.
Yeah.
You see it going on right now, and you see the fallout, and then you see it fallout multiple times. And
Mhm.
we just need to build a better world and build better kids. There you go.
Yeah, I like
So thank you
that.
very much, Beth, for coming on the
Thank
show. Give us
you
your
for
.com so people can find you on the interwebs.
yeah, familynesting.org will get you to everything.
There you go. Order the book wherever fine books are sold.
Mhm.
Nesting After Divorce, Co-Parenting the Family Home. It's got my endorsement on it. Let's build a better world for kids and divorce. And if we can, how about if we figure out, to keep people from getting divorced. Like maybe take some classes on how to build a healthy relationship and maybe work out your shit before you get married, people. That's my endorsement. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Foss, youtube.com/Chris Foss, LinkedIn/Chris Foss, and all those crazy places on the internet we are. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you